Now we continue on with the Industrial Revolution. If you remember from early sociology lectures, the Industrial Revolution was the thing that kickstarted the actual sociology. We had really no need to study. We had other ways of looking at the world. We had religion, we had philosophy. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution and vast change, exponential change, that people felt inspired to respond to that change. And they responded to that change. And as they responded to that change, philosophy kind of transformed into sociology. All right, so we won't spend a ton of time looking at what exactly is the Industrial Revolution because we all pretty much know that. About 250 years ago, machines. So instead of having the animals do the work, we would create machines that would do the work for us. And the consequence of that was this vast structural differentiation or further division in our society of institutions into sub-institutions into sub-institutions, like looking at the Department of Education and how it covers K through 12, and then it has higher ed, and then there's preschool, and then there's all these different subsegments of everything within our entire society. That's what they're talking about with structural differentiation. So I said that the Industrial Revolution was a kickstart to sociology. Two of the main theorists were Tönnies and Durkheim of this time. Durkheim was a bit more of a philosopher. Tönnies was a bit more scientific and kind of pushing the field further into sociology. At least Durkheim was in the beginning. He eventually ended up being much more scientific. But in his beginning writings, he was very much a philosopher. So those two tackled the change. And what they were doing was comparing early life, village life. This is a picture of the harvest from early 1400s Europe, give or take. You can see that they're all working together. Some of them are resting. Some of them are working. There's really no division into what belongs to who. They know that if they cooperate, then they will all eat this winter. And then on the top, you have the London slums in the late 1800s, and then you have a picture of a factory in the Industrial Revolution with all those open gears and all those open tape things. They've got a name for them. I can't remember what it is, but you can see the gears and everything just all running together. So Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft for Tönnies and mechanical solidarity versus organic solidarity for Durkheim were comparing and contrasting those two different realities, say 1400s Netherlands, which is what I think this picture is, if I remember right, and 1800s London or Paris or Berlin or wherever they're writing from. So for Tönnies, this Gemeinschaft, this village life, he called it community. And he basically defined it as everybody's living the same life. They don't really even need rules because they're all the same person, which I thought was kind of interesting. Almost like hunters and gatherers, except you're not hunters and gatherers. Everybody is the same. Everybody does the same stuff, eat the same stuff, do the same stuff, think the same stuff. And because of all that commonality and sharedness, all of their actions and interactions together are based on that. It's based on that. The knowledge is full knowledge of each other as just like themselves. And then Gesellschaft is the evil city. He was very pessimistic. So the evil city where the crime of individualism happens, where you become an individual instead of part of a group. So he's very negative. He does not like the city. Durkheim with his mechanical solidarity versus organic solidarity. Again, he's looking at the same harvesting people over here. And he says that, yes, they have a shared lifestyle. I can kind of go with Tönnies on that. And they have kinship, and they have shared religion, and they have shared way of life. So they're pretty much kind of the same for that first part. Although Tönnies thought that the Gemeinschaft was natural. If you put people together in a small village like that and build a village over time, you're going to get this. It's a natural way of being human, cooperative. Kind of sounds like Karl Marx now. So, and then the big city comes and takes that away from you, and then you become kind of a individualistic jerk. So the city is full of these individualistic jerks now. For Durkheim, we're looking at mechanical solidarity versus what he calls organic solidarity, which is more the intertwined nature of the city where everybody is reliant on everybody else. There's too much to be done. You can't all take off for a few days and go harvest the wheat crop anymore. Somebody has to do this, and somebody has to do that, and somebody has to do something else. And we all have to work together in this grand division of labor in order to have society happen. And what's interesting about these two is that they developed these before and after kind of ideas independently. They were not really speaking to each other at that time, but they found out about each other, and then they would write snarky reviews about each other's work in philosophy and sociology journals. So it's kind of fun to go see some of the, they're like 500-word essays, so it's not like comment sections where you see now, but they would write this huge essay of the, I think you're completely wrong and this is nonsense. And then the other one would write, I think you're completely wrong and this is nonsense, back and forth at each other for a very long time. So, and then, Durkheim is a little more optimistic. He believes that we will evolve and continue to evolve, so we might be something else besides organic solidarity, and it will be good, positive direction, very, very, very optimistic. Tönnies is not. He really thought that the cities were going to collapse and we were going to go back to villages pretty soon. Some other people look at Tönnies' work and they look at that call to tribalism, really. If being in that small group environment, that shared reality is the natural state of humans, then we will always have that call to that type of life where we don't have to decide things anymore. I mean, just picking your toothpaste is sometimes an excruciating decision, much less everything else that we have to decide in life. Sometimes we've got this pull toward never having to make decisions again. So he really thought that the city would collapse and then we would go back. So that's those two. So post-industrial is, again, post-industrial, after the Industrial Revolution, where we have basically transformed from a society that makes things to a society that thinks things and serves things and does things for people. So the majority of laborers are now in the service industry. Theoretical knowledge is the key organizing feature. You can think of things like the algorithms that have helped me choose all these pretty little colors that I've been using on these PowerPoint slides. None of the writers of the algorithms have apparently ever taken a sociology class because they were trying to give me petri dishes for culture. And I'm like, no. So theoretical knowledge is the organizing feature. We hope to plan and control technological change. We don't do a great job, though, when Mother Nature gets in our way. We try. We think that we have everything, but we don't always succeed. If you can think about what happened in Texas with the ice storms. And then intellectual technology dominates human affairs instead of the creation of things, factories, creation. It's more intellectual. One guy I follow on Twitter calls it fake email jobs. You get up in the morning, you email people all day, have a few meetings, and then you're done. And then you wake up the next morning and you email a whole bunch of people and you have some meetings and you're done. What is that? An entire life career of emailing and meetings. But that's what the post-industrial world is. That's what it looks like. So if you're a visual learner, Pescasolido and Rubin have put together some charts in their publication from the year 2000 that try to capture what does the interaction look like then. So if we used to be Gemeinschaft and now we're Gesellschaft, or we used to be mechanic solidarity and now we're organic solidarity, and then you throw a little postmodernism in the mix, because remember Durkheim and Tönnies were dead like in the early 1900s at the latest, so they know nothing about postmodernism. They can't really do that for us. So we kind of end about 1900 with that look at the world. So Pescasolido and Rubin kind of catch us up and say, if you are in that early pre-modern time, you are in the middle, that little tiny little dot in the middle, and every group you belong to is layered on top of other groups. Your social networks are stacked, as they call it. If you are part of a family, then part of an immediate family, then an extended family, then a neighborhood community, and then a village, and then the people who go to the village church. there you go. Everything's stacked. You very rarely run into strangers, and you pretty much spend all day, all the time with people that you know. You can contrast that with the modern times where you are the white dot kind of sort of in the middle with the small dot, and you are belonging to groups, but those groups all kind of overlap like Venn diagrams in the modern times. So you have overlap. Like you may go to work and then some of the guys you work with are on a bowling league with you or something, or some of the people in your neighborhood belong to Girl Scout troop with some other neighborhood. So there's a lot of overlap yet in this modern time. You're not branching out too much. You can be a little bit different in each of these circles. You can have a tiny bit different self, but you can't go like you do now. You're going to look at us now and you can see what that looks like. So before we get completely now, let's go to 1990, maybe 1995. Go back in the day a little bit, and you were looking at our interactions with people and the groups that we belong to, and we're in the middle, and we belong to a whole bunch of groups with. They still have them overlapping at this point, and probably in the 90s you did have some overlapping between most of your groups. You would have strong attachments to some, you would have weak attachments to others. Some are real temporary, like those moms you sit with in a waiting room while your kids do stuff. That's a pretty temporary group. When your kid quits doing that stuff, you don't see those moms anymore. But then you have other groups like your families and close friendship groups that you hold on to for longer periods of time. Now, imagine the internet comes. So now what you have, and if I was good at actually drawing transitions and everything, I could draw this for you, but imagine balloons coming out of this middle. You can't see the mouse, I'm sure, when we're doing this, but imagine balloons coming out of this middle, and each balloon is like an online interactive group that you belong to. Now those balloons never have to touch each other or touch the ground. You can have groups that you only have ever known online. And within those groups, you can be anybody. I mean, think about the Sims games, and you create yourself an avatar. You don't have to be anything like you are. And probably nobody would ever know that. So in these contemporary times now, postmodern times, not only do we navigate a whole bunch of relationships that are coming out of the different statuses that we occupy on the ground, we also manage a bunch of relationships that are in the sky, kind of literally, right? Up there in the cloud in the internet world. So it's a very different way of being with people. That's kind of what this transition of societies is trying to show us, that there's no one way to be human. You can be human hunters and gatherers style, you can be human pre-modern style, you can be human postmodern style, and we all kind of figure it out as we go. But I don't want to be pessimistic too much like Tunnies and say, and it's all going to be bad. It's going to get just worse and worse. It's just going to get different in a sense. And some of those differences are going to be positive, and some of those differences are not particularly going to be that positive. And then to catch us all up with the global world, we kind of go through processes of expansion and contraction. And we're kind of in a contraction stage now where everybody in their societies is saying, leave me alone. But then other times we're much more of a global interconnected. I mean, the reality is that we are a global interconnected world. But the perception is that it's us against them. But other times in our history, we see ourselves as more interconnected. So we just kind of swing wildly back and forth. And Tunnies would almost say that those contractions are almost like that pull back to community, that everybody living the same life, not having to make a whole lot of decisions. Everybody does everything together. It's this whole, I don't want to use organic because that makes you sound like Durkheim, but that's the word that he used. It just grew organically, like it was natural. That's a natural way to be human. And he feels that we have that pull every once in a while to go back to that natural state, kind of like Karl Marx did. We will overthrow the bourgeoisie and go back to hunters and gatherers. Now, at least Tunnies let us be villagers in the agricultural society. He didn't take us all the way back there, but he took us a good bit back. So he has that pull back to some sort of small group existence, as though that is the pinnacle of human society. So we'll see, right? Maybe we'll get interconnected again and see ourselves as a broad coalition of people, a global community, instead of us versus them.